feel so fragile. I can shatter. Today's the day I shine. So I dream someone who'd fly. For a moment I could touch the sky. Lifted from these feelings I can fly. When life again comes around to drag me down, I reach for my pencil and turn it around. Tempted by your devil's kiss, promising unending bliss, drag me into an abyss. Hypnotized by your eyes, desire you can't disguise, seduced by your lies. Tempted by your devil's kiss, promising unending bliss, drag me into an abyss. What felt so good to start is shattering my heart. Loving you's a dying art. Tempted by a devil's kiss, promising unending bliss, drag me into an abyss. No string sounds fun, loving on the run, till you're the lonely one. Tempted by a devil's kiss, promising unending bliss, drag me into an abyss. A heart as cold as ice, you're my greatest vice. I keep paying the price. I'm addicted to your devil's kiss and you. What do I do? I'm addicted to your devil's kiss and you. What do I do? I know I must break free before I lose the best of me. End this living purgatory. Tempted by a devil's kiss, promising unending bliss, drag me into an abyss. I've got news for you, I'm ready for something new. I know what I've got to do. Goodbye, devil's kiss. I'm your miss. Heartbreaks I won't miss. I know what I've got to do. Goodbye, devil's kiss. Goodbye, your miss. Goodbye, devil's kiss. Goodbye. Read me a book just the other day, taught me to see things a whole new way. Said my problems were just opportunities, if I could only learn to change the way I see. So I counted up my assets just like it said to do. Here's what I found that I can offer you. I've got 30 things I can't sell, car in the driveway that's broke as hell, $75,000 in debt, a college degree that ain't been paid off yet. One sterling silver necklace a friend gave to me, and 39 years experience living in poverty. Well, I scratched my head at the bits I found, but I didn't quit yet, the advice seemed sound. Woo! They told me to keep a tally and to take measure had to do. Here's a few more things I can offer you. I got a voice like an angel, you can order it to go. I can write you a song, poem, or book, you know. I can teach you to paint or to draw if you please. I can speak to a large group or small with great ease. I can offer a couch to the wealthy who seek a unique experience, living poor for 5,000 a week. Felt so much better as I wrote down this letter. All I need now is people who pay. A little money goes a very long way, and maybe this will be a great story to tell. If only I can find someone who'll buy the things I can sell. Won't somebody please buy the things I can sell?
All right, we are back. I'm going to close out of that because that's not what we're here for. Today is Real Talk. And we are talking about what is a better life? How do you define it? Because one of the things that's happened over the last couple of weeks in my life is that I have become very, very aware that the single common denominator between all people everywhere throughout the world, actually all organisms really, we all want the same thing. We all want a better life. We want a life where it's easier to thrive, where it's, less costly to survive, where we get to fulfill our maximum potential. Hey, it's Timothy Richards. Good to see you. Haven't been around in a while. I'm glad to have you here. I hope you're doing all right. I know that you are certainly in search of a better life right now. And I know that often we don't feel like we've got what it takes to get to a better life. Like we feel limited in our capacity, limited in what we're capable of achieving and doing, and so a better life may not even feel possible, But really, that's the thing of it, is whether or not a better life is possible for us, no matter what's going on in our life, really comes down to how we define that. If I define it as my better life is, well, when I was younger, I'll give you a perfect example. When I was younger, I thought, a better life meant having unlimited access to money, which would give me unlimited access to anything I wanted. And so I set out in pursuit of that. That was my goal. That was everything. I poured everything into getting there. And only to realize that that particular path was not producing the better life I wanted. But I guess I continued hardcore pursuing that path until 2016. And I spent a year ghostwriting for people who had made way more money than I'd ever dreamt of that year. And that was the interesting thing about that year, was listening to them tell their stories and seeing the pattern. Like, they would pursue money at the expense of everything else. Everything else. Put their relationships on hold, thinking that when they got to the peak that they were trying to achieve, they would come back and, then they would devote time to their relationships. Then they would be free to take off and do things with their family and to build those relationships. But what happened instead was that they spent so much time devoting themselves to this pursuit of their version of a better life, that the people in their lives got neglected. And people are not toys. You can't just stick them on a shelf and expect them to still be there when you decide to come back. And so what they came back to was unhealthy relationships. The relationships that they'd had, people had either left or they didn't have a relationship even with their spouse, and so they ended up either divorced or, miserable for a while. And basically everything, their kids didn't know them, didn't care about them. They were left with these transactional relationships where they didn't even know if the people in their life were there for them or for their money. And so they became miserable, but afraid to let go of the money because they were afraid of who they would be if they didn't have it. So they ended up trapped in this, what I call a paper cage, because of their view of a better life was so attached to money, it had become part of their identity. And they thought that if they didn't have it, then they wouldn't be somebody worth loving or worth being around. And I recognized too that they'd pursued money almost inevitably in an effort to make themselves feel better about their lives, about themselves. In other words, to reduce their insecurities. And yet, instead of reducing the insecurities, it did the exact opposite thing. It amplified them. And I thank God every day that I spent that year doing that, because it really did show me that money was not all it was cracked up to. That if you got money at the expense of relationships, you would end up with a whole pile of money and a lot of misery to go with it. So it wasn't worth sacrificing your relationships to get to. And that meant when I was building a business, I went slower than most people would have, because I didn't want to sacrifice my relationships to get there. And so it leads me to realize that how we define a better life changes everything, because it changes what we prioritize. It changes the direction we're headed, and it changes what we value and what we don't. And I know that, brushes with death have a real way, a very weighty way of confronting us with what matters and what doesn't in a big hurry. When you're healthy and everything's fine and you think you've got all the time in the world, you may value different things. I know when I was 27 years old, I got basically told I had 5 years and I better make them count. And on the day that I got told that, I had this list of like 100 things I wanted to do before I died. And on that day, I went home and tore that list up, and it became 5 things that actually mattered. And the first on that list was when I wanted to fix my relationship with God, because even though I joked at a younger age that I was going to be given the tours in heaven, or not in heaven, in hell, because I'd walked away from the church. I wasn't convinced that the Christian worldview was correct or was beneficial. So I left the church. I wasn't going to church. So my statement on that end was more of a mockery of the Christian worldview. But when you're confronted with your death and the very real possibility of going to hell if you don't straighten up, suddenly that isn't a joke anymore. So I wanted to fix my relationship with God so that I didn't end up in the bad place for all of eternity. And the second thing on that list was I wanted to fix the relationship between my husband and my son, because at that point in time, they couldn't stand each other, and I knew if I weren't in the picture, they'd tear each other apart rather than lean on each other or be there to help each other. So I wanted to fix that. I didn't know what that was going to take. The third thing was I wanted to make sure that I left this world with them financially set up and taken care of. That there was nothing that they needed or that they lacked, and that they would be okay when I was gone. And then, of course, that was back when I saw money as part of the path of a better life. And the fourth thing, which is going to sound odd, when you've been given 5 years to live and a college degree takes 4 years to get, it's almost like, what's the point of that? But my mother and my grandfather both had been so desirous for me to get a college degree that I wanted to get one for their sake more than for my own, so that they would be validated and not think that I was a failure, or not feel like they had failed me, I guess is a more accurate way to put it. And then the fifth thing on my list, I wanted to leave the world a better place for my having been in it. And at that point in my life, I knew it wasn't. I knew that I hadn't really contributed to things in any significant way. I hadn't made the world a better place. If anything, I was a selfish little snot. And so I knew that if I died that day, well, plenty of people who would probably say good riddance. And so yeah, that totally changed. That confrontation with death totally changed my priorities. Totally changed what I thought a better life should look like and how it should function. It would take me years before I subtracted money from that equation and realized that love was the better kind of wealth to build toward. That shift wouldn't come until closer to 2020, I think, really. Yeah, so not that long ago, 6 years ago, basically, is when I really kind of started, because in October 2019, I was so busy chasing money still that, God slowed me down, pointed out to me that my pursuit of money was skewing my judgment, leading me to take on clients that were leaving me drained and not really producing good results for him, for God. And he told me, I want you to learn to live without money. And I was like, what do you mean learn to live without money? Landlords don't take IOUs. How am I going to live? How am I going to pay for groceries? How am I going to, all the things, right? And he pointed out to me that day that fruit trees don't come with coin slots. Neither do any food plants, right? And medicine plants. They don't come with coin slots. And land does not appear with coin slots built into it. That human beings made money, and we made it to protect our hearts from being taken advantage of by other people. But if you're walking with God, nobody can take advantage of you, because God will always turn what they do into something that blesses and benefits you. So he is your shield, and he is your protector, and he is your defender. And so you can't be taken advantage of anymore. You don't need to guard your heart, because he is your guardian. But it did take me a while to figure out exact processes by which you could live without money in this world, since almost everything in this society that we are in kind of relies upon money. And the problem with that is that it creates a very transactional mindset. I'm only going to give as much as I get. And so instead of producing a true better life where you're loved and you're cared for just because of who you are, without you needing to do anything other than live your purpose, you have to, you get reduced to what you can do for somebody else and what they think you're worth, based on what you can do for them. That just sort of produces a very, it gets in the way of love, we'll put it that way. Because love doesn't count the cost. Love doesn't sit there wondering, you know, how much I'm going to get out of everything I give. I always found it, my family was very transactional when I was growing up, and so you never got anything without somebody demanding something of equal value in return. Nobody ever gifted you money to help you. They just, if there was money that you got from them, it was expected to be returned back exactly as much as you got, and preferably more. So that didn't create a very loving mindset, a very generous mindset. And so it's been a while for me to learn to break free of these things and to start redefining how I see a better life and how I see everything else, right? What counts as true wealth for me has changed significantly over the last 6 years. I define true wealth as love, and money as just a means of you know, a much limited form of wealth where, yeah, you can get things, but you're actually bypassing the development of relationships that would come closer to love. Hey, it's Pookie! Good to see you. So now that I've explained my whole thing about why I care about a better life and what it means to me, what is y'all's definition of a better life? I mean, I'm interested. How do you define a better life for yourselves? What is it you guys want out of life? Hey, it's Boomer. Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Yeah, I've been just kind of describing the journey that I took to the point where my attention and focus is on what it takes to achieve a better life, because what I realized is that we all want a better life. In fact, every organism is ordered toward moving toward a better life where survival takes less energy, and so it costs less to get to that better life. It allows for growth, maintenance, and repair of breakdown with less and less cost. So a more efficient operation, and that's really what we're all trying to get to. But we don't share a definition of what a better life is, or are usually don't always share ideas about how to get there. And so, or even have a common consensus about what's getting in the way of us living a better life. And I thought, you know, if we start this conversation, if we have this dialogue about what we believe a better life is and how we take steps to get there, or what we think are the obstacles in the way of us getting there, then as a community, we can create a shared definition of a better life, a shared idea of how we get there and what our obstacles are, and we can begin working together so that everybody in the community is able to achieve a better life and have the best possible outcome for their lives. So that everybody's thriving, everybody's prospering, everybody's growing, everybody has what they need. And, you know, that's obviously a dream, a goal, and an ideal that'll take time to achieve. maybe we don't get there in this lifetime, but I still believe that the work is worth doing, that the goal is worth striving toward. And so, yeah, that's what I want to know. What is y'all's version of a better life? What is it y'all want for your lives? So that I can be an active part of helping you get there. You know, because that's one of the things that I recognize is that so often, you know, we don't stop and we don't ask and we don't slow down long enough in our own pursuit of a better life to look around and see what we can do to help somebody else make their life better. So that's what I want from you tonight, is to let me know, what's your version of a better life? What do you think is stopping you from getting there? Let's work it out. Maybe partner together on getting you there. I know we've all got problems, we've all got obstacles and challenges and things we're working to overcome, and maybe that's a little bit scary to open up about for some of us. Maybe, you know, admitting to what we think is a better life, maybe that's a lot to ask. Personally, my version of a better life right now involves helping other people figure out a path to theirs and overcome the obstacles that stand between them and the better life they want. And that's kind of what my creativity is for, is helping people get there, helping people see how they can get there. So that's what I'm on about. I know, it's kind of a big topic. You're living a great life one day at a time. That is all you can do, Timothy. One day at a time, you know? Take each day as it comes. Let it, appreciate that it's there. Because no day is guaranteed. Not even for people who are supposed to be healthy do we get a guarantee, right, of tomorrow. I think that's one of our tendencies. Yes, absolutely. Thank God every morning I wake up. Yeah, I do too. You know, I spend the first part of my day, usually, in prayer. Literally thanking God for everything and asking Him to help me be a better person, be able to love better, to serve better, and to be a more effective member of His team. Hashtag Team Jesus. I need that t-shirt, actually. I think that's what I'm going to work on. Is hashtag Team Jesus. You know, because that's my main man. And but yeah, I agree. Thanking God every morning we wake up is a good way to start the day. And you know, not that we're gonna ever be perfect. Well, I say that. Perfection is a journey, is what I had to learn when I was younger. I used to be a big time perfectionist, and what that really meant was that I couldn't even bear to look at my failures, because I thought if I could just be perfect enough, then I would be loved. And so every time I failed, yes, exactly. It made me feel like I was not lovable. It was proof that I was not lovable, that I would never be lovable, that I'd failed yet again at achieving that, and that was physically painful to me. And so I would end up blaming other people or or the circumstances, anything at all, to avoid taking responsibility for a failure. And it took years and years of work before I realized that, you know what, failure is just a learning opportunity. It's not proof that you're not lovable. And making mistakes is part of the human condition. It's we all have, there's objective reality which exists, and everything in our universe is tied in, plugged into that objective reality. And human beings are not in control of that objective reality. We just have to deal with it. The problem is the amount of that objective reality that we can see and how clearly we can see it is limited. We have a limited capacity to, based on our senses, based on our experiences, based on what we've encountered in life, a basically limited ability to understand and interpret that objective reality. So when we are trying to solve the problems in our life or trying to accomplish things, we're not doing it through an accurate lens of objective reality. We're doing it through a distorted lens of perceived reality. And so what you get is that perception of reality banging up against that objective reality. And that's where you get failures and mistakes. It's really a perception gap. And we all have that perception gap, the gap between what our perceived reality is and what objective reality is. And so those failures help us figure out what part of our perception is inaccurate. What part of our perception needs to change in order to better align ourselves with objective reality. And so that's part of the journey of humanity, that we have to humble ourselves to realize we don't have all the answers. We can't have all the answers. We're not supposed to have all the answers. And kind of plug into the one who does have them all. Because that's the only way that we get correct knowledge of how objective reality works and stop banging our heads against the ceiling of perceived reality. It's kind of like perceived reality is like the attic in a house, you know, and it's small and it's cramped, and if you've only ever lived inside that attic, you think that's the whole house, instead of recognizing that the house has a lot more to it than this attic. And so you keep bumping your head against the ceiling of that little attic, and you think, oh man, I hate that this is hurting. I wish there were more to it. Well, there is. And that's kind of part of the point of pain and suffering and grief, is to get us to the point where we'll strive to expand our definition of reality. Kind of, that's pain, suffering, and grief as us bumping against the ceiling of perceived reality and needing to adjust course. But we don't do that work on our own. We'll just sit there, oh, it's my life. You're in this tiny cramped attic. And we'll live our entire life in that tiny attic when we are actually living inside of a giant mansion. So, with greater possibilities than we can imagine if we just got out of the attic. That's my point of view. That's what I've been working through this past week. You know, we went to, last week, you know, we took the trip down south to Oklahoma City, and then I went and visited my mom and my stepdad and my two nieces that live down south, and got to see my sister, spend quite a bit of time with her. And there was a friend that I was going to see, but he wasn't in a good headspace for it, and so kind of didn't get to see him. But that's okay. We came back home. It was a good trip. car made it. We weren't sure it would. We were so blessed. That little $500 beater vehicle has been one of the best investments we ever made. Seriously. And so it was a crazy, crazy situation of getting to go down. But I didn't do any work on my writing. I didn't get a lot done last week. And I was feeling kind of bad about that until I sat down and realized, oh my gosh, over 40 days, I wrote 90,000 words and then took a 4-day vacation from it, which was probably actually a really smart thing to do, because that's when your brain does a critical reset. You know, is when you're not working on that project, when you've gone ahead and you've done the thing to let your brain have some break time, have some rest. And came back to Morris, and Monday I got an absolutely beautiful opportunity to meet with the spiritual director, who gave me a blessing on the work that I'm doing, so that was great. And then I spent, or I guess that was Tuesday, and then I spent a couple of days, and this is going to sound a little odd, on the mathematics of world building. And the reason for that is, like, I was looking to compile my 3-page synopsis, and I had been tackling it from several different directions and was having trouble, and I wanted to create a definite system that would work across all the things, you know, no matter what genre somebody's tackling. And that's where it occurred to me that, okay, math would be a good way to step back and pull it back to its most basic elements. Because math is not about the numbers as much as it's a super succinct way of telling stories about relationships between people, places, things, you know. And so if you can pull it back to its highest level abstraction, then it becomes something you can use for anything. You turn, you know, for instance, if you have a specific person in mind, but you abstract back to their role and you relabel the name of that person to, for instance, from Peter Pan, let's say, right? Peter Pan is a specific person with a specific personality, but if you wanted to tell the story of Peter Pan without using his name, but treat him like an archetype, you could pull it back and call him, say for instance, a young boy. And now the story applies to any young boy. Or you could call him a magical elf. And now the story applies to any magical elf. You can drop in any name and still have the same function. I hope I'm making sense and not just rambling like a crazy person. Although, there are, elements in my life that are totally crazy, so there's that. But yeah, so that's what I've spent the last week working on, and now I'm really starting the editing process for the book that I wrote, making sure that I am testing as I go, that I'm putting in everything I need to make the book its absolute best and most effective for the reader who gets it. Because I want to equip people to be able to take the stories that they believe about themselves, which are part of their foundational identity, and in large part determine how they operate in life. How you define yourself, how you see yourself in relationship to life, the universe, and everybody else. That matters. If you've got a story in your head that says, I'm a worthless loser, you're going to behave like a worthless loser because your brain is working to meet that definition and to prove you right. And on the other hand, if you have a story about yourself that says, I'm a work in progress, you're going to be okay with all your mistakes and screw ups because you understand that you're a work in progress. You're not meant to have everything together. You're not meant to have everything perfect because a work in progress doesn't have everything together, doesn't have everything perfect. It's being perfected. And so how we define ourselves and the things we say about ourselves matter so much. They change how we behave. So the stories that we have in our heads very much rule the way that we operate, the way that we behave, the things we think are okay and the things that we don't. And so I want to equip people to take control of the story they're telling themselves about who they are, because it's often based on distortion, perception of past events and the meaning that we derive from that. And that shapes how we see ourselves and what we believe is true about who we are. And so if we don't ever go back into those stories and re-examine them, well, the story that we told ourselves when we were at a much younger age ends up driving every decision we make forward and creating a train wreck out of our lives. And I don't want people to be stuck in that mode. I want people to be equipped to take control of the story that they're telling themselves, to heal the past, the things that have hurt them, the things that made them feel like they were less than, and step forward into a new version of themselves. Recognize that no matter what somebody else did to them or said about them, that isn't the reality of who they are. That isn't about them. I think that's one of the mistakes we make, is that we believe that people do things to us because of us, because of who we are. And in reality, 99.99999% of what other people do to us is about them and their limitations and their weaknesses and their quest for a better life and their misguided notions about what that means. They're not trying, and even when their intention is to hurt us, in some way they're wanting us to be hurt because they think that we don't understand their pain, and so they're passing it on to us because they think that we don't understand their pain. Well, now you're going to feel what I feel. And it's a messed up mindset, but it's how a lot of people think. That the only way for other people to ever understand even a fraction of the pain that they experience is to perpetrate pain on other people, not realizing that most people already carry enough burdens in life. You don't really need to do that. That, you know, we all have our own burdens to carry. We all have our own pasts to overcome. We all have trauma that we're recovering from. And so I always try to keep that in mind when people do ugly things. They're doing the ugly thing not because of who I am, but because of what they're going through. And they're just doing it in an unhealthy way. And so that often helps me to navigate situations where people may, even people you love deeply, may behave in a very ugly manner toward you. And you can either take that deeply personally and let that wreck your life because you make it part of your identity, you make it about you, or you can realize that this is just them dealing in a wrong way with their own pain and garbage. It's basically, you know, they're kind of dumping their garbage on you, but it's not about you. It's about them trying to get rid of the pain that they're in in an unhealthy way. So that's also part of why I'm so motivated to do the work that I'm doing right now, is because I really do want to equip people to take control of the story of their lives, to decide for themselves who it is they want to be and what they believe a better life is, and then figure out how well ordered, produce a well ordered life. Something that's going to lead them in a really healthy direction, not something that's going to distort them or destroy them. As we will make dumb choices, plenty of them, if we're not given the tools to straighten things out in our minds. And, logically, it's the reason that people look like they're making stupid decisions. A couple of things. A lot of times they're making decisions that the child version of them that got hurt seems rational to that child version of themselves, and they've never updated that part of their lives. I'll give you an example. When I was 4, my father left home and didn't come back. And 4-year-old me did not understand why. All she knew was that the man that told her he loved her more than anything else in the world had just left and not come back. And so 4-year-old me, not understanding the whole circumstances or situation, wrote this little tiny story in my head that read, I am not lovable. Because after all, if the guy who tells you he loves you more than anything else in the world can just up and walk away from you, how lovable could you really be? And I was 40 years old before I realized that that was the story that had been running my entire life, from the age of 4 until the age of 40. And it was destroying my marriage. It was destroying my career life. It was doing exactly what you would expect if you put a 4-year-old in charge of making decisions for yourself. Doing crazy things, prioritizing all the wrong stuff, making all the wrong moves. Nobody would put a 4-year-old in charge of driving their car, right? Because we all know what would happen if we did. We all know that would end up with the car a wreck, with the 4-year-old a wreck, and probably other people a wreck. And yet, here I was at 40, and that 4-year-old version of me had been running the car of my life with predictable results. And I just thank God that he called me to write my story, and that's the reason that I uncovered that particular story that had been running my life, was because I was trying to answer his call to write my story, even though I didn't really understand why it mattered. And I had started with the moment the last memory I had of my father. I didn't even intend to uncover all this. I was just thinking about that day and why that memory and not any other was the only memory I had left of my father as a child. And that's when I figured it out. That's why, because that day traumatized me so much that my mind held on to that memory with all it could, because the truth is that the stronger the emotion we feel around an event, the faster and the more deeply carved that memory gets encoded into our brain. So basically, the brain determines that memory is so essential to survival that we should never, ever, ever let go of it. And so it deeply, deeply carves it directly into our brain and prioritizes it above all other things. And the sad thing is that if it's a negative memory, it gets carved even faster than a positive memory of equal power does, because those negative memories are seen as death vectors. So they're putting us in connection with some kind of mental, emotional, or spiritual or physical death. And so the system is designed to help us survive, and so it wants to eliminate any of those things that bring us to a point of spiritual, emotional, mental, or physical death. And so that's why those particular memories tend to linger long past the point of their usefulness. And we forget other memories that may have been even more powerful or better for us to remember. Those things get forgotten, but these things get stamped into the brain. And that's one of the things that makes forgiveness so hard, is that we have to have an entire perspective shift in order to be able to let go of that or rewrite the meaning of it. Because that's part of what happens, is that because we don't actually experience objective reality, we experience perceived reality. Part of the brain's job is, when a thing happens to us, to interpret the meaning of that thing that happened to us in order to make a decision about how to act on it. And then from the decision about how to act on it, we feel the emotions, and the emotions drive us toward actually carrying out whatever action we decided on, if we don't recognize that process and stop it. But, we will have somebody will do something to us. There's an immediate thought about what that means and how we should handle it. And then there's a decision made about what action to take, and that decision, the emotion, is there to prepare the body for action. The decision is the brain's immediate, the emotion is the response to the brain's decision, so that all systems are prepared to execute whatever action the brain has decided it should take. But those emotions can be wrong, right? We may feel angry and want to punch a wall. We may feel sad and decide to cry. And that may not be the helpful thing to do at the moment. It may not be the time to cry. But yeah. So all of these things, stories, are so interwoven into how we see life, what we perceive to be the better path to getting a better life, what decisions we make to take ourselves in the direction of a better life. And so that's kind of why I'm so driven to get this book done. And not a book. The book is the foundation of what I want to do. But that's something too, to realize, that I realized, is that I looked at this thing that I was doing as being about a book, and it's not about a book. It's about a ministry of helping people heal from their past, uncover their true identity and the purpose they were born for, and then go out there and live it boldly and without fear. Just really step into it and own it, unburdened by the past, but instead built up by their past. So whatever they've had happen to them, that they can profit from it instead of shrink from it or hide it, because that's our natural tendency, is to want to hide it from the rest of the world when it hurts. Kind of want to throw in this equivalent of a mental junk closet and lock the door and never look at it again, and never let anybody else look at it either. Either because it's so painful that we don't want to experience it again, and we think if we hide it away we can avoid experiencing it again, or because we think it's so shameful that nobody could love us if they knew about it, and so we want to bury it. And both of those responses sound perfectly fine and good, but in practical reality, it leaves us an emotional minefield of trigger points where a step in the wrong direction and we end up blowing up at somebody, or we end up falling apart because somebody said something at the wrong point in time and hit one of those trigger points. Because all of those unhealed places and spaces in our life become points where we get triggered. In fact, one of the things I tell people is if you're being triggered by something somebody else says, that's an invitation to explore, where are you needing healing? Where is the wound that's leading to the trigger? Because healed people don't get triggered. Healed people are in control of their emotions. It's only unhealed, wounded people that get triggered. And the idea isn't to tiptoe around the trigger. The idea is take control of your triggers and find the places and spaces where you need healing and then get that done so you stop being triggered. Because triggers, if you're living your life with triggers, then you're allowing other people to basically emotionally manipulate and control you. You make yourself so easy to manipulate when you have those unhealed wounds. And the other thing you do is you make yourself, it's so much harder for you to resist temptation, because temptation is the brain saying, okay, this is what you want for a better life. Well, I've got this. It's a shortcut. Sure, you know it's not going to produce that better life in the long run, but it'll feel good in the moment. And so your brain wants the shortest path to feeling better. And so that's where temptations come along. Little Debbie's, right? Shortcut to feeling better. Have a few more. And of course, you know, then you end up with diabetes over time. So, you know, and it's not, I'm not speaking about this from on high. I'm speaking about this because I've been through it, analyzed it, figured out why I was doing what I was doing, and recognized the mechanism behind it, and went, wow, okay, we need to fix that. When I was younger, there was a person in my life who consistently stomped on my triggers, like deliberately stomped on them. They would just poke at me, poke, even though I told them those were there. And they wouldn't stop. And so I basically shut them out of my life for 6 months because I told them, look, I don't like the person I become when I'm around you and you do those things. And so since I'm not currently in control of my emotional response, we're going to take a break from this relationship until I get control. So that you can't trigger me because I've got control of those triggers. I've healed the area that's wounded, and that's not a threat anymore. And that's what I did. I took a break from that relationship for 6 months to find what was triggering me and get a handle on it so that they couldn't provoke me anymore because those were under control. And I'm glad that I did, because, you know, I don't like to close the door forever on a relationship, because, you know, that person can heal and I can heal. But I also don't like to put myself in a position where I am not in control of myself and I'm losing my mind every time I'm around them, because that's not healthy for either of us. And so my goal is to be beneficial, to have relationships that are mutually beneficial. And if I'm losing my mind every time I'm around somebody, that is not a mutually beneficial relationship. that is a very unhealthy and dysfunctional relationship, and it probably is time to take a break. At least until you can figure out why and get that under control. So yeah, I have basically run my mouth off for the better part of an hour. And I can talk all day long, but is this benefiting you? Is this helping you in any way? Is there anything you would like to talk about, ask about, know about? Anything I've said tonight that you are curious about or want to know more about? I mean, I don't want this to be a one-sided conversation, although it does tend to be. At some point in time, I kind of need to, I think, set it up so that I can have y'all on and we can talk about it for real. It's a little difficult in chat, but I'll have to work out how that's going to be done. Pookie pokes me all the time, but she makes me laugh when she does it. Yeah, well, I mean, that's good though. If she can poke you and make you laugh, I think that's a bonus. Oh, that's a positive trigger is what I'd call that, as opposed to a negative trigger. So you're innocent. I believe you, Pookie. Nobody who loves little W's could be guilty. In my defense, Your Honor, I love little Debbie's. I could not possibly have done the crime. I can see that as your defense. Could this face have done something so awful? No. No, it's not possible. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any questions and don't want to explore anything else or talk about anything else, I think I am going to call it a good stream for tonight. And yes, I will be back on Saturday with Together We Write. So we'll pick back up our storytelling there. I missed, 2 weeks is quite a bit of time to miss on that. And I am glad that we'll be able to get back into the story and start working on it. Kind of eager to see where it goes. You have little Pookie Swiss roll shirts and stickers up in my merch store. Oh, nice. I'm going to have to get rid of those. I really will. That is legendary. Actually, at some point in time, Pookie, I'm going to have to get your address and send you a carton of Little Debbie. It's just the thing. It's going to have to happen. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, you guys, I thank you for hanging out with me. Yeah, that'll be great, Pookie. Love to have you there. It has been a great stream. I have enjoyed the time with you. I hope anything that I've said has helped you. But if not, I'm so grateful for you being here and listening to me basically ranting about life, the universe, and everything else. And I'm going to call that a stream. So, y'all have a great rest of your evening. God bless you wherever you go.